did a quiet corner of New England suddenly become the stage for one of the most devastating cartel crackdowns in modern US history? The Drug Enforcement Administration DEA, backed by Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE and local law enforcement, delivered a shockwave through Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire in an operation that netted more than 170 arrests and over 500 pounds of narcotics. In a country where fentanyl overdoses are now the leading cause of death for young adults, this operation was no ordinary bust. It was a strategic strike against the Sinaloa cartel itself. The question is, if such networks are operating this deep inside American neighborhoods, how far does their reach truly extend? Federal officials reported that in just 1 week, cartel operatives lost massive caches of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine drugs worth tens of millions on the black market. Experts note that these seizures disrupted not just retail-level sales, but entire supply chains. According to Reuters, nearly 22,000 counterfeit pills were confiscated, many disguised as prescription medication. The DEA described the operation as dismantling the infrastructure of cartel activity in New England, an infrastructure that had quietly but firmly taken root in towns that once seemed far removed from Mexico's shadow. To put this in perspective, cartels rarely expose their high-level operatives to direct law enforcement risk. Yet here the arrests went beyond street pushers to target seasoned logisticians, distributors, and coordinators. DW's coverage emphasized that what happened in New England is a sign of shifting cartel strategy embedding into suburban America, where detection is slower and resistance less anticipated. Lawrence, Massachusetts emerged as the critical hub, a city strategically located near Boston and linked to a broader pipeline across the Northeast. Why is this significant for U.S. national security analysts? Point out that cartels have begun to mirror the structures of insurgent groups. Like militias in Ukraine or proxy militias in the Middle East, these cartels leverage technology, exploit weak enforcement nodes, and adapt rapidly when confronted. Jane's Defense Weekly recently compared cartel networks to hybrid actors that blur the lines between organized crime and paramilitary organizations. In this sense, the Boston area crackdown is not unlike NATO's recent warnings about non-state actors undermining stability from within. The timing is also critical. As the Russia-Ukraine war intensifies and U.S. attention divides between Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific, cartels calculate that domestic enforcement might weaken. Al Jazeera highlighted that while Washington focuses resources abroad, groups like the Sinaloa cartel exploit vulnerabilities at home. By embedding in U.S. communities, they secure revenue streams that in turn help them expand internationally, just as proxy militias fund regional conflicts through smuggling. Consider the figures. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that in 2024, over 110,000 Americans died of drug overdoses, with fentanyl responsible for the majority. Defense News emphasized that this number now surpasses combat deaths in any modern U.S. war. Seen through this lens, the DEA's operation saved thousands of lives that might otherwise have been lost not on foreign battlefields, but on quiet American streets. Western experts stress that such operations have a deterrent effect only if followed with relentless pressure. A former UK intelligence officer told The Guardian that cartels operate like hydras, cut one head, two more emerge. The US must therefore sustain international cooperation, particularly with Mexico and China, given that most precursor chemicals for synthetic drugs originate in Chinese factories before being shipped to Mexico for processing. The Biden years once prioritized fentanyl diplomacy, but under Trump's renewed presidency, the rhetoric has hardened. Trump has openly threatened military action against Mexican cartels, framing them as national security threats on par with foreign adversaries. NATO strategists warn that treating cartels like terrorist groups could escalate tensions with Mexico, but some U.S. officials argue that the scale of deaths justifies extraordinary measures. This raises a haunting question for American viewers. If cartels can burrow into Boston's backyard, using apps and delivery systems that rival legal corporations, how can communities ever feel safe? And beyond safety, what does this level of infiltration say about America's broader ability to defend its own territory while balancing global crises abroad? What if the most dangerous drug dealer in your community isn't lurking in an alley, but instead in your teenager's pocket disguised as a harmless smartphone app? the DEA operation revealed a chilling reality. The Sinaloa cartel has modernized its business model, shifting from street corner exchanges to seamless digital transactions that mirror Uber, DoorDash, or Amazon. According to federal agents, encrypted messaging apps, ride-share drivers, and even regular postal services have become part of a shadow logistics system capable of delivering a deadly pill with just a few taps. This isn't an exaggeration. Investigators showed how fake Adderall, oxycodone, and Xanax were marketed through social platforms such as Snapchat and Instagram. Payments were processed with mainstream mobile apps, and deliveries could be made to nearly any doorstep. The Guardian cited one DEA official who admitted even trained professionals can't visually distinguish these pills from legitimate pharmaceuticals. That means unsuspecting students, athletes, or even working professionals could order counterfeit medication and never realize they were gambling with their lives. The cartel's digital infiltration mirrors the hybrid tactics seen in geopolitical flashpoints. NATO analysts recently warned about gray zone actors exploiting digital platforms to destabilize societies, whether it's Russian disinformation in Ukraine, Iranian cyber campaigns in Israel, or Chinese tech pressure in the Indo-Pacific. The Sinaloa cartel falls neatly into this pattern, not as a government, but as a criminal empire weaponizing technology for profit. In essence, their digital reach poses a domestic threat comparable in strategy, if not scale, to hostile foreign campaigns. The numbers illustrate the urgency. Out of 22,000 counterfeit pills seized in New England, the DEA confirmed that 50% contained more than 2 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill the average adult. Experts from DW compared the danger to playing Russian roulette with every swallow, as users can't predict which pill contains a lethal dose. These aren't slow burn narcotics, they're instant killers designed to hook or to wipe out. Western security experts highlight that the shift to digital platforms has expanded the cartel's reach exponentially. Unlike traditional dealers limited by geography, smartphone distribution networks are borderless. A fentanyl-laced pill could travel from Lawrence, Massachusetts to suburban New Hampshire in under an hour, bypassing traditional checkpoints. Jane's Defense Weekly noted that the system resembles clandestine weapons smuggling networks where encrypted apps and civilian carriers mask military-grade shipments. In both cases, law enforcement is left racing to catch up with actors who thrive in the shadows of modern convenience. At the policy level, Trump has already pushed for tighter cooperation between Silicon Valley and federal agencies. His administration has threatened penalties for tech companies that fail to monitor illegal activity on their platforms. Critics, however, warn of civil liberties concerns echoing past debates over surveillance during counterterrorism campaigns. Yet supporters argue that the digital battlefield is already costing American lives, with fentanyl deaths dwarfing casualties from foreign conflicts. The calculus is brutally simple: act now or watch the death toll climb. This digital shift also ties into America's global vulnerabilities. As Reuters reported in mid-2025, China continues to be the primary source of precursor chemicals used in synthetic drugs. Despite diplomatic pressure, Chinese factories have evaded stricter controls, fueling an industrial pipeline that empowers cartels like Sinaloa. In the same way, Washington pressures Beijing over microchips and rare earths. Experts now argue that fentanyl precursors should be treated as a strategic threat to national security, not just a law enforcement problem. The parallels are sobering. While U.S. destroyers patrol the South China Sea and NATO tanks reinforce Ukraine, a different war rages at home, fought not with missiles but with smartphones. As one former CIA analyst told Al Jazeera, "It doesn't matter how many carriers you deploy abroad if your kids can be killed by a pill ordered on Snapchat." The sentiment captures the paradox of America's position in 2025, projecting power globally while fighting for survival domestically. The implications are clear. Defeating cartels requires more than arrests. It demands a whole-of-society approach, tech accountability, community education, and international cooperation. Without it, the cartel's digital empire will only grow. So here's the question: if the Sinaloa cartel can turn everyday apps into lethal weapons, are American institutions from Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill ready to fight a war on this new digital front? How many students heading back to school this fall realize that the little pill they take to stay awake or study longer might be their last? Investigators revealed that the Sinaloa cartel has been deliberately targeting young Americans with counterfeit Adderall and oxycodone, marketing them as study aids during exam seasons. The strategy is calculated, ruthless, and devastatingly effective. According to the DEA, 5 out of 10 seized pills contained more than 2 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill instantly. These numbers are not just statistics, they are warnings written in blood. The CDC reported in early 2025 that drug overdoses remain the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. Among these, fentanyl is the silent executioner responsible for tens of thousands of deaths annually. What's striking is how the cartel exploits cultural pressure points. Students in Boston, Manchester, and Hartford, stressed by exams, could easily mistake a deadly counterfeit pill for a harmless boost. It's no different from how Russian forces exploit winter energy shortages in Ukraine, or how Iran times drone strikes during Israeli political crises. In each case, adversaries weaponize vulnerabilities at moments of maximum strain. Experts stress that the cartel's marketing tactics are brazen. DEA agents displayed pills colored purple or stamped with logos to mimic legitimate pharmaceuticals. The Guardian reported that the branding was so polished it resembled corporate packaging, but behind the polished exterior was a product designed not for relief but for addiction and death. Overdose deaths are collateral damage, DEA Special Agent Jared Forget explained. Profit is the only motive. This mindset strips away any illusion of morality. Lives mean nothing, only money. Jane's Defense Weekly compared the counterfeit pill trade to improvised explosive devices (IEDs) used in Iraq and Afghanistan. Both are cheap, deadly, and designed to spread fear. And just as NATO forces had to adapt with new technology and tactics to counter IEDs, so too must American communities adapt to fight back against counterfeit pills. The scale of the threat is staggering. In the New England raid alone, 22,000 counterfeit pills were seized. That figure alone could represent thousands of funerals that never happened because law enforcement intervened just in time. Western experts add that the crisis cannot be seen in isolation. Al Jazeera emphasized that synthetic drugs are easier to conceal and distribute than plant-based narcotics like heroin or cocaine. Unlike poppy fields that satellites can track, fentanyl can be synthesized in labs no larger than a garage. This decentralization makes enforcement harder and cartels stronger. It's why, according to DW, global synthetic drug seizures have risen by more than 70% in the last 3 years. Meanwhile, the political stakes are growing. President Trump, under mounting pressure from grieving American families, has once again vowed to classify cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. The move would give U.S. forces broader authority to target cartel operations beyond American borders. Critics warn this risks escalating conflict with Mexico, but supporters argue the status quo is unsustainable. We are losing more people to fentanyl than to foreign wars, one analyst told Reuters. If that doesn't justify extraordinary measures, what does? The impact on NATO cannot be ignored either. While European allies face their own drug crises, the US epidemic highlights vulnerabilities that adversaries could exploit. A weakened, distracted America consumed by domestic drug deaths might be less focused on commitments abroad. Russian strategists are watching closely, calculating whether US attention can be divided between narco wars at home and conventional wars abroad. For families in New England, though, the crisis is deeply personal. Parents bearing children, schools on alert, and communities scarred by overdoses all testify to a hidden battlefield. And unlike wars fought overseas, this one unfolds in bedrooms, dormitories, and suburban kitchens. So the pressing question becomes, if counterfeit pills can so easily bypass doctors, pharmacists, and parents, what safeguards must America put in place to prevent an entire generation from being poisoned in plain sight? How did a quiet post-industrial city like Lawrence, Massachusetts transform into the beating heart of the Sinaloa cartel's New England empire? The DEA's week-long operation exposed the city as the cartel's central hub, strategically positioned just north of Boston with easy access to highways and distribution routes stretching into Connecticut, New Hampshire, and beyond. Out of the 170 arrests across the region, Lawrence accounted for nearly 50 proof that the cartel was not dabbling in the area but entrenched. Agents reported that many fentanyl shipments seized in New England bore direct links to Lawrence. According to Reuters, entire packages of pills and powder were traced back to stash houses in the city, suggesting that local infrastructure had been built with the efficiency of a multinational logistics center. This wasn't a scattering of street-level pushers. It was an organized distribution network leveraging local contacts, rental properties, and digital delivery systems to pump poison into communities. DW noted that Lawrence's economic struggles made it a fertile ground for cartel infiltration. Vacant properties, limited local resources, and proximity to major transit routes created the perfect environment for illicit operations to flourish. Experts compare this to how militias embed themselves in unstable regions, exploiting weak governance and using local discontent as cover. In Lawrence, the cartel's presence blurred the lines between ordinary neighborhoods and narcotic strongholds. The situation mirrors global patterns, just as Russia entrenches supply depots in occupied Ukrainian cities, or Iran positions militias in fragile Middle Eastern states. The Sinaloa cartel anchored itself in Lawrence to project power across an entire region. This is why the crackdown struck so hard. It didn't just seize drugs, it disrupted a strategic base of operations. Jane's Defense Weekly even described Lawrence as the cartel's forward operating base in the northeastern US, a term usually reserved for military campaigns. The ripple effects across New England were stark. Connecticut recorded 64 arrests, with Hartford and Bridgeport identified as secondary nodes feeding local markets. New Hampshire, often perceived as insulated from large-scale narcotics operations, saw 33 arrests, including a major bust in Franklin. Al Jazeera highlighted that the spread of arrests across 3 states underscored the cartel's strategy decentralization. By embedding in multiple communities, the network could withstand small disruptions. Only a coordinated strike of this scale could uproot it. From a national security perspective, the revelation is sobering. If Lawrence can serve as a hub for one of the world's most powerful cartels, what other American towns are being transformed into hidden strongholds? A senior US official told The Guardian that cartels are not just at the border, they are inside the fabric of America. This echoes NATO's recent warnings that internal threats, whether from cyber networks or narcotics pipelines, can weaken alliances as surely as foreign armies. The Trump administration has seized on this narrative, framing cartels as direct enemies of the American people. Trump himself has suggested that cartel hubs like Lawrence should be treated as domestic war zones where federal power must override local limitations. Critics, however, warn of militarization of policing and its impact on civil liberties. Still, the political resonance is undeniable. Parents in New England see their children at risk, and calls for stronger federal intervention are growing louder. At the community level, the scars are visible. Schools have had to issue warnings about counterfeit pills. Police departments in smaller towns are stretched thin, unable to combat networks backed by international cartels. For families, the discovery that Lawrence served as a regional epicenter is chilling. It means the cartel wasn't just passing through, it was planting roots. This raises a fundamental question: if a city like Lawrence can become a cartel hub without drawing national attention for years, how many other communities across America are already serving as silent command centers for criminal empires? What global supply chain fuels a pill in Boston that can trace its origins back to factories in China and drug labs in Mexico? The DEA's investigation revealed that the Sinaloa cartel's reach is not regional, it is multinational, operating with the sophistication of a global corporation. According to Reuters, the precursor chemicals essential for synthetic drugs such as fentanyl and methamphetamine are shipped from Chinese producers to Mexican ports, where cartel chemists convert them into finished narcotics. From there, shipments moved north through established smuggling corridors before being distributed in US cities like Lawrence. The synthetic drug boom has reshaped the narcotics industry. Unlike cocaine or heroin, which rely on agricultural production, fentanyl can be manufactured year-round in compact labs. Jane's Defense Weekly noted that this shift has given cartels near limitless scalability while reducing their vulnerability to crop eradication or seasonal supply issues. The result is a far deadlier, more stable revenue stream that has spread worldwide. DEA officials confirmed that Sinaloa operations extend into more than 40 countries, making them a criminal enterprise on par with global energy or shipping giants. Western experts highlight the adaptability of cartels as one of their greatest strengths. DW compared the Sinaloa network to a hydra. When one arm is cut off in the US, another grows in Europe, Africa, or Asia. The arrests in New England, while significant, are just one front in a worldwide struggle. Al Jazeera reported that simultaneous operations in Latin America and Europe were coordinated alongside the Boston crackdown, demonstrating that only multinational pressure can meaningfully disrupt cartel activity. From a security perspective, the cartel's global reach resembles the challenge NATO faces with adversaries like Russia, Iran, and China. Each employs proxies, hybrid tactics, and transnational operations to stretch Western resources thin. The cartel's chemical supply chain from China echoes the very same vulnerabilities that the US and its allies face with semiconductor and rare earth imports. Dependency creates leverage, and in this case, the leverage is measured in American overdoses. Strategically, the Trump administration has reframed cartel activity as a foreign policy issue. By linking fentanyl precursors to Chinese producers, Trump has tied the crisis to his broader confrontation with Beijing. His administration has already threatened tariffs on Chinese chemical exports and hinted at sanctions targeting companies linked to cartel supply chains. The Guardian quoted one senior official as saying, "If Beijing cannot or will not control precursor chemicals, we will treat them as complicit." Such rhetoric pushes the narcotics crisis beyond domestic law enforcement into the realm of geopolitical confrontation. Meanwhile, Mexico remains a complicated partner. The DEA has long depended on cooperation with Mexican security forces, yet corruption and cartel infiltration make this relationship fragile. Defense News reported in 2025 that cartels maintain influence across Mexican police and local governments, undermining joint operations. Critics argue that without stronger bilateral enforcement, U.S. crackdowns will only temporarily disrupt the flow before it resumes through alternative routes. The sheer volume of seized drugs underscores the challenge. In New England alone, more than 500 pounds of fentanyl, meth, and cocaine were taken off the streets. Experts calculate that this equates to millions of potential lethal doses. Yet compared to the tons of narcotics trafficked annually, the operation is both a victory and a reminder of the scale of the problem. As one European analyst told DW, stopping one container does not stop the fleet. This framing forces Americans to ask hard questions. How does the US confront a criminal network that operates like a multinational corporation, adapts like a military insurgency, and kills more citizens annually than most wars? And if America struggles to contain this threat within its own borders, what does that reveal about the West's ability to control global networks, whether cartel terrorist or state-sponsored? Can a single victory in Boston's backyard truly shift the tide in America's war against the cartels? The DEA's week-long operation sent shockwaves through the region, but officials cautioned that this was only one battle in a much larger war. By dismantling a major Sinaloa hub in New England, law enforcement saved countless lives, yet experts warn the cartel is already adapting probing for new routes and fresh vulnerabilities. The numbers are impressive. Over 170 arrests, 500 pounds of narcotics, and 22,000 counterfeit pills taken off the streets represent one of the largest regional seizures in years. But as DW reported, the cartel views such losses as operational costs. For them, American overdose deaths are not failures, but acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of profit. They don't care if 10 people die or 10,000, one DEA official told Reuters. They care only that the next shipment arrives. This chilling mindset underscores why the fight is far from over. Experts from Jane's Defense Weekly argue that cartels now operate as resilient hybrid organizations able to reconstitute supply lines in weeks, leveraging global connections that make them nearly impossible to eradicate. Their reliance on digital tools, encrypted apps, and decentralized logistics mirrors how insurgent groups sustain themselves despite military defeats. Al Jazeera compared the fentanyl crisis to a silent war won, where the casualties pile up in homes and hospitals rather than on battlefields. From a geopolitical perspective, the crackdown carries wider implications. NATO allies are closely monitoring the US domestic struggle, aware that weakened American focus could ripple across collective security commitments. A distracted America torn between supporting Ukraine, deterring China in the Pacific, and fighting cartels at home presents opportunities for adversaries. The Guardian quoted one European diplomat warning that if fentanyl consumes Washington's bandwidth, Moscow and Beijing will notice. The Trump administration has responded by framing cartel operations as an existential threat on par with foreign adversaries. Trump has renewed his push to designate cartels as terrorist organizations, opening the door to expanded military options. He argues that cartels undermine U.S. sovereignty in the same way hostile states do by killing Americans on a scale that surpasses conventional war. Critics caution that militarizing the fight risks destabilizing relations with Mexico, but supporters see it as necessary escalation. For communities, however, the crisis feels immediate and personal. Parents are being urged to speak openly with children about counterfeit pills. Schools are training staff to recognize overdose symptoms. Local police are collaborating with federal agencies to stay ahead of digital drug markets. The message from law enforcement is clear: vigilance is as vital as enforcement. This leaves the U.S. facing a sobering reality. The operation in New England was both a triumph and a warning proof that the cartel's grip reaches deep into American neighborhoods, and that even decisive victories cannot eliminate the threat entirely. Cartels adapt, technology evolves, and communities remain vulnerable unless vigilance, cooperation, and global pressure continue. So here's the final question for viewers. If the cartel war is already inside America's borders, are the nation and its allies prepared to confront it with the same urgency and unity as wars fought overseas? The DEA's unprecedented crackdown in New England marked one of the largest blows against the Sinaloa cartel in recent memory, with over 170 arrests and 500 pounds of narcotics seized. Lawrence, Massachusetts emerged as the cartel's regional hub, a chilling reminder that transnational crime has embedded itself in American neighborhoods. Investigators revealed that cartels now exploit smartphones, apps, and delivery services to distribute deadly counterfeit pills targeting young Americans with lethal precision. The operation highlights the transformation of cartels into globalized adaptive networks supplied by Chinese chemical exporters and fortified by Mexican labs. Experts warn that the fight against fentanyl resembles counterinsurgency campaigns, decentralized, ruthless, and technologically savvy. While the arrests saved countless lives, cartels view such losses as temporary setbacks, quickly rebuilding their networks. Strategically, the crisis threatens U.S. national security by dividing attention between global commitments, Ukraine, the Middle East, the Pacific, and domestic survival. Trump's administration is pushing for tougher measures, including terrorist designations, to elevate the fight to a new level. For NATO allies, the message is clear: America's internal vulnerabilities can have global consequences. Will decisive actions and sustained vigilance be enough to prevent cartels from claiming even more American